Who is the single most difficult adversary Novak Djokovic has ever had to face? If you were to poll the fans here at the Australian Open 2026, most would probably bet the house on one specific name. For the better part of 20 years, we have had a front row seat to his wars against the titans of the sport, witnessing the sweat, the 5-set thrillers, the heartbreak, and the ultimate glory. But when you really drill down who actually pushed the Serbian legend to his absolute breaking point, your gut instinct likely screams Rafael Nadal, and honestly that makes perfect sense. We are talking about 60 head-to-head clashes on every court type known to man, including that unforgettable marathon right here in Melbourne during the 2012 final that spanned nearly 6 grueling hours. Think about the punishing defeats on the red clay and the psychological chess matches that went far beyond simply hitting a yellow ball over a net. Nadal has been the constant thorn in his side since day one. The Spaniard was a relentless force of nature, a man who simply refused to roll over and let Djokovic ascend to the throne without a fight. The electricity between these two was never just about competition, it felt deeply personal, almost primal in its intensity. Alternatively, your mind might have wandered to Roger Federer, the epitome of elegance who ruled the tennis world before Novak crashed the party. Their rivalry possessed a completely unique flavor. It was the classic battle of the establishment versus the rebel artistic beauty clashing with ruthless modern efficiency, culminating in moments like that historic Wimbledon 2019 final. That championship point saved remains arguably the most clutch high-pressure instance we have ever witnessed in the history of this sport. Federer was the mountain Djokovic had to climb to validate his own legacy. There was immense respect, sure, but also a burning desire to prove he deserved a seat at the big table. And we certainly cannot overlook Sir Andy Murray. While the trophy cabinets might look different, true tennis aficionados understand the reality of their dynamic. Murray possessed an intuitive understanding of Novak's game that was superior to almost anyone else on the tour. They were childhood friends who grew into rivals, pushing and dragging one another to performance levels that neither man likely would have achieved in isolation. Think back to the 2012 US Open or that historic Wimbledon final in 2013. On that scorching British afternoon, Murray made Novak bleed for every single point in every game. There was a distinct brotherhood forged in the fire of competition that made their specific matchups uniquely exhausting for both men. So when the 24-time Grand Slam champion paused to answer this question recently, you were likely shuffling through those 3 names in your head. 3 of the greatest athletes to ever swing a racket, representing 3 entirely different methods of sporting torture. The anticipation was thick enough to cut with a knife, but his answer was shocking. The toughest opponent mentally is myself. Physically, it is Nadal. He elaborated, noting that the physical wars with Rafa were simply agonizing in a way nothing else compared to. He pointed specifically to the longest Grand Slam final in history, the 2012 Australian Open, clocking in at 5 hours and 53 minutes of pure, unadulterated combat. Novak recalled winning that decider with a score of 7-5, though he admits the details blur into just one long memory of survival. That distinction hits you differently when you let it sink in, because the Serbian superstar just verbalized something we have all watched, but perhaps never fully grasped. The most significant conflict in elite sports is not always against the person standing across the net. Often it is the war waging inside your own skull. It is the self-doubt, the crushing weight of expectation, and that quiet voice whispering that you are not worthy or that the occasion is too grand for you to handle. Djokovic has been locked in combat with that internal shadow his entire career, and by his own honest admission, that has been the hardest monster to slay. However, when we shift the conversation to the physical realm, Rafael Nadal stands alone in a stratosphere of his own. Their legendary rivalry goes far beyond the statistics, even though the numbers alone are enough to make your head spin. It is about the sheer bodily tax required to outlast a man who utilized his physique like a blunt weapon and treated the tennis court like a literal battlefield. Rafa did not just return serves, he pulverized your legs, emptied your fuel tank, and dismantled your physical integrity shot by punishing shot until you had nothing left to give. Between the heavy topspin that kicks up to your shoulder, the miraculous retrievals, and the ability to flip defense into offense in a split second, playing Nadal was never just tennis. It was an exercise in survival, and nobody knows that truth better than Djokovic, who endured those clay court massacres where the Spaniard was virtually immortal. Novak has claimed victory in some of those wars, such as the monumental 2021 French Open semi-final, but the cost of admission was his entire soul. You could see it etched on his face in the moments after defeating Nadal. It was never just the joy of winning, it was the profound relief of having survived the ordeal, as they are opposites in style but equals in their capacity for suffering. Nadal built his legacy on controlled chaos and ferocious aggression from the baseline. Conversely, Djokovic relied on surgical precision and a defense that seemed impenetrable. When they collided, talent was never the deciding factor. It always came down to who could tolerate the physical torture for just 1 minute longer. Who had the will to chase one more ball when every muscle fiber was screaming for mercy, and who could stay sharp when exhaustion became the third participant in the match. That 2012 final in Melbourne lasted nearly 6 hours, and remember, both men needed chairs during the ceremony because their legs simply gave out. That transcends sport. That is modern-day gladiatorial combat in its rawest form. When Novak names Nadal his toughest physical test, it is not a slight against Federer or Murray, it is the ultimate badge of respect. He is acknowledging that while he mastered his own mind and solved the puzzle of Federer's elegance and Murray's tactics, nothing compares to the physical gauntlet of the Bull of Mallorca. 60. Separate times they walked onto the court, meaning 60 times Djokovic had to prepare his body for total war. Even sitting here in 2026 with the statistics clearly in his favor and the world proclaiming him the undisputed greatest, Novak Djokovic still points to Nadal as his most formidable hurdle. That admission reveals the sheer magnitude of the challenge he faced. It was never just a match, it was a war. That is the unvarnished truth of the matter. The struggle was absolute and the legacy is permanent. Now we turn the question over to you fans watching at home. When you look back at the history of this sport, which rivalry captures your imagination the most? We will be reading through your answers below. If you are enjoying our daily coverage from Melbourne, please take a moment to like this video and hit that subscribe button for more non-stop action from the Australian Open 2026. Stay tuned and we will see you very soon.